Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Old World video. In today's episode, we shall be doing a tournament after action report. That's right, it's time for some more dispatches from the front lines. And oh boy, do I have an interesting meatball for your viewing pleasure today. Because I decided to take a pretty fluffy Empire army to a tournament. Guys, we're talking state troops, but most importantly, we're talking detachments. The historically unique rule, the thing that defines the Empire of Man and their fighting style in the old world. Well, we are going full hog on that, and we are taking big old parent units and big old detachment units as well. We will be engaging in genuine pike and shot tactics. So if that tickles your fancy, well, you know what? Hold the line and let's charge right into today's episode. As is tradition, I want to start off by saying a few thank yous. And I want to say a big thank you to the tournament organisers and host of this event, Just Play Games in Liverpool. Now, those of you who have been following my channel for a while now will have heard me mention Just Play quite a lot. And frankly, it is one of my go-to places for tournaments. It is the quintessential friendly local gaming store. They've got a fantastic range of models. They've got great staff. They sell snacks and food and drinks. You can while away your entire day in Just Play, having a great time and just geeking out. And on top of that, they run some really good events as well. They've got an experienced tournament event team, people that not only run them, but also play in them as well. And that really reflects in the quality of the event. So I want to say a big thank you to Just Play for hosting an old world event, because traditionally they do a lot of 40k stuff. And not only that, but hosting a pretty good one as well. I also want to say a big thank you to all of my opponents, John, James, and Ed. Because when you go to a tournament, it's very much a social thing. When you have a good game or a bad game, that's going to come down to the people that are opposite you, that you're playing against. And all of these games were just so much fun. This is one of my favourite tournaments I've been to a long time. And that is simply because of the fantastic people that I got to play against. So big thank you to all of those guys for making it a great event. But with all of that said, let's get into the video proper. And let's start off with the list overview. Now, as per usual, I have done a separate video going into the fine detail, the nitty-gritty of the army list that I was running at this tournament. And I will make sure that there is a link to that video down in the description below. Starting at the top with the characters, I had an Empire General who was my general, and he had the Sword of Battle to give him a little bit more punch, and he had full plate armor and a shield and the White Cloak to give him that sweet 3+ armor, 5+ ward. On top of this, I had a Captain of the Empire who was my Battle Standard Bearer, my BSB, and he just had full plate armor and a shield. He had a hand weapon, and then I gave him the Talisman of Protection, so he also had a 3+ followed by a 5+. These two characters combined, they went in the same unit, and the whole thing is that they give out a nice Leadership 9 re-rollable buff between the General's leadership and the BSB's ability. My final character was a level 4 wizard. She was running elementalism, and her magical gear was the wizard's staff, the ruby ring of ruin, and also a lore familiar. And I ran pretty much the same spells every single time. I went for, of course, the ruby ring has got fireball in it, and then I had wind blast and summon elemental spirit to really have a bit of magical dagger. And for my buffing spells, I went for the earthen ramparts, and then I went for, I think it's called Travel Mystical Pathways. It allows you to teleport one unit 12 inches. I've never really used Travel Mystical Pathways before, but I wanted to give it a go, so I took it in pretty much every game. We then get to the infantry corps, and I had a lot of corps in this list. I had a big brick of 38 halberdiers, which my general and my BSB were going to go in to make that a total of a unit of 40. And they had full command with halberds and light armor, but no shields or anything like that. That big brick was supported by 2 detachments. I had a unit of 10 handgunners, no other upgrades, no command, no marks or anything like that, just 10 handgunners. And then I had a unit of 20 Empire Free Company. That's right, baby! I have been itching to use my Free Company in a tournament, and they are here. A lot of people poo-poo them because they've got Impetuous. I actually never found Impetuous to be a problem. Either I wanted to charge anyway, or they passed it. So yeah, Impetuous wasn't a little bit of foreshadowing there, but the Free Company were a genuinely interesting unit and a ton of fun to use. And one of my best units, one of my most performing units in the tournament as well. Now that was my first big brick. My second big brick was a unit of 25 spearmen with full command. There were no characters in there. And then I had a unit of 10 crossbowmen as a detachment for them, and another unit of 20 Free Company as a detachment for them as well. So 2 big bricks of state troops supported by 1 unit of missile state troops and 1 unit of Free Company each. For my fire support, I had in the special section 2 great cannons. And then in my rare section, I had the Hellblaster volley gun, my favorite war machine in the entire game. And I also had, of course, the steam tank, which is just a beast. It's a bit of a crutch, I have to admit. I feel very sad when I don't use my steam tank. I feel very underpowered. But the steam tank was in there, and it was, as always, a ton of fun to use. General tactics for this list was to hold the line, use my superior firepower to force the enemy to come to me, and then essentially try and whittle them down so that my state troops and my detachments could win in a war of attrition. Now that covers the army that I was running, but let's get into the lay of the land. What was the format of the event and how competitive was it overall? So this was the second Old World tournament that Just Play was running, and they were using a very standard RTT style format. So it was 1 day, it was 3 games, it was 2,000 points, and we were playing on the 60 by 44 board size, so the smaller one, not the 6x4. In addition to the restrictions in the normal army composition, for example, like the Grand Army, they also had a hard rule of 3, except for core units, which had the rule of 6. Now, there were 10 players overall, which did make it a somewhat smaller event. And sometimes with these small events, you get things that can be a little bit softer because it's people that are just bringing whatever they want and trying different things out. I would not say that was the case in this event. I would actually describe this as fully competitive. This wasn't semi-competitive, this wasn't a softie. This was actually a little bit sharky, to be honest. All the players were lovely, don't get me wrong, but they were all pretty experienced. Everyone had been to at least one tournament before or had played a lot of practice games. And then you also had the fact that I'd say about 70% of the lists there were strong or downright meta. For example, there was a guy running Orcs and Goblins who actually won the tournament overall, who was running the full Orc and Gobbo artillery train, lots and lots of war machines, and it was damn effective. I think that Old World is starting to solidify its meta a bit. People are still trying new stuff and it's still very much in the honeymoon phase, but when you go to a tournament now, it's not people just throwing things down, seeing what's working. You find that the majority of people have actually, they've been through that stage already, and they're now wanting to bring the teeth to the tournaments, which is nothing wrong with that. That's exactly where you should be bringing the teeth when you're playing your Old World games or other competitive games. But I think that is enough pre-event, preamble, if you will. Let's get to the reason why you're all here, the battles. And let's start off with game number 1. Round 1, I was paired into John, and this wasn't any old John, but this was John from the Tales of a Tournament game video that I did a few months ago. Now, if you've seen that video, you know the story behind it, and it was great to bump into him again, and not only that, but actually get to play a game against him. And it'd been a few years since actually last time we'd been able to play against each other, and it was so much fun being able to reconnect with the new, with a new game, and also reminisce about some of the old times as well. Now, John was running Khorne Demons for his army, and I really liked this force. If you look through a lot of the models, especially some of the bloodletters, you will see some classic miniatures in there. Now, he had 2 units of Khorne bloodletters, And then he also had 2 of the skull cannons and 2 heralds on, I don't know, they're not on skull cannons, but kind of on the blood chariots. I think they're called blood thrones. He then had a unit of the blood crushers and a unit of the corn dogs as well. The mission was the classic pitched battle, and for deployment, I put my spear block with its 2 detachments over on the left flank. In my center, I had my halberd block with its 2 detachments, and then towards the right-hand side, I had my cannon, I had a hellblaster, and I had my level 4 wizard. And I also had the steam tank, and I had 1 more cannon that I deployed over on the left-hand side because I wasn't sure where John's war machines were going to go down, so I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of anti-chariot wherever I might need it. For the demons deployment, they put a unit of bloodletters down on the left flank. This is all from my perspective. They then had a cannon and also a herald that was sort of towards the left. In the mid, we had another cannon and the herald, and we had the blood crushers. And then towards the right hand flank, we had a unit of the bloodletters and then the corn dogs. Now, we rolled off for the first turn, and Skinwalker Mordian was in action because I did manage to win the roll-off. I very rarely go first at tournaments, but what was interesting with this army is it only had about 5 drops in total because of how the detachments work and how placing war machines work. So I had the +1 to go first every single game. Now, in my first turn, I marched forward a lot of my melee stuff because I wanted to take advantage of the building in the middle to break up the advancing corn forces. I wanted to try and use that building to anchor my flanks and create these little cauldrons, these little pockets where the corn could come in, and then I could maybe flank charge them or stand and shoot them a bit and, you know, really sort of hit them from all angles. So I marched forward trying to start getting that set up. I then unleashed with my shooting, and it went pretty well. Firstly, I went to fire my handgunners, but I wasn't in range. 24 inches, turns out, isn't very far at all. But I then went to shoot my crossbowmen, who were in range. And straight away, I was like, ooh, definitely seeing the benefits of crossbows. They pretty much guaranteed to get an extra round of shooting. And when there's only 5 or 6 turns of shooting in a game, that's a pretty big deal. So my crossbows went first, and they were able to kill 2 of the bloodletters, the sort of small corn demons, over on the left flank. But then we got to the proper shooting, and I fired with my great cannon on the right hand flank, and I just picked up a skull cannon. Just one shot, got the hit, got the wound. John failed his invulnerable save, and I just rolled a 6 on the dice. That becomes 4 damage with the multiple wounds of the great cannon, and that was 1 skull cannon down. Nice. I then fired my next great cannon and was able to do 2 wounds to the other skull cannon, and then I fired my steam cannon and I was able to kill 1 of the blood crushers. Not a bad opening barrage, to say the least. 1 skull cannon down, 1 blood crusher down, and 1 skull cannon badly injured. We then go over to the corn demons turn 1, and it's a pretty predictable turn. Everything marches forward. Everything flies forward. Everything just goes for it. So we have the bloodletters on the left-hand side. They can march like 10 inches. I didn't realize it had like a 5-inch move. That's really, really good. So they're storming down the left flank way quicker than I expected. We had the herald on the blood throne, and he comes forward towards my spearmen. And then we have the other herald and the blood crushers go towards the center with the other bloodletter unit as well. Finally, the corn dogs moved down the right-hand flank. The one thing of note was that the remaining skull cannon tried to fire at my great cannon, and unfortunately just didn't get the distance. John placed the dice 10 inches from the back, is exactly what you meant to do, but then with his shot, he only rolled like a 2-inch overshoot, and then for his bounce he rolled like a misfire, so it was stuck in the ground. So he didn't actually get to counter battery me with his skull cannon, which was a big sigh of relief for me because it meant that next turn I get the chance to just win that artillery duel. Speaking of my next turn, turn 2 for the Empire rolls around, and movement is pretty limited this time. In terms of the combat units, I don't really advance very aggressively forward. I just sort of do my turns and I get these pockets set up successfully, so when the corn eventually inevitably charge me turn 2, I'll be able to do some good standard shooting and some good counter charging as well. Over on the right-hand flank, though, I do charge my steam tank into the Corn Hounds. Yes, it is bait. Yes, the Corn Hounds are going to try and tie my steam tank up, but I'd rather charge them so I get my impact hits than they charge me, and it's really going to be grinding out for a long time at that point. Over with shooting, I fire my crossbows on the left-hand side to kill 2 more bloodletters, just very consistently, just putting 2 of them down. That has taken a rank off them now, which is good. And then I also am able to fire my handguns into the blood crushers, and I'm able to do a couple of wounds to them as well. That wasn't too bad, actually. Didn't quite kill it, but I did a couple of wounds. I fired my other great cannon. I fired my great cannon on the left-hand side, and it finishes off the skull cannon, so I have won the artillery duel. And then over on the right-hand side, my other great cannon actually misfires. I'm like, oh, here we go again. I'm inevitably going to roll a 1, and I roll a 6. So the cannon just goes, poof, and just doesn't get to shoot that turn, which is the first time that's ever happened to me. I then fire the Hellblaster volley gun, and I start doing some serious work and inflicting some pretty heavy casualties onto the other unit of bloodletters, which are coming at me down the right-hand flank. As for combat, the steam tank flubs it a little bit. Doesn't get a huge amount of impact hits, doesn't get a huge amount of stomps, and only manages to crush 1 corn dog and injure another one. And they pass the leadership test, so they don't actually end up losing any more to demonic instability. They might do a wound back to me. It's not a huge amount of damage. I have essentially been tar-pitted by the corn dogs, but we've got to get through them anyway, and hey, it's still points in the bank if we do get rid of them. But now we get to turn 2 for Corn, and it's crunch time. And as someone who's been here before, who's played a few Empire games, you always feel like you're doing really well against these combat armies until combat is joined. And so I knew this could be a pretty brutal turn. The Blood Crushers charge into my halberdiers, but I am able to use supporting fire from the handgunners, and I am successfully able to kill the injured Blood Crusher on the way in. That's a big help. Now there's only 1 of them coming into that big unit of halberdiers. The unit of the Herald on the Blood Throne then goes into the unit of halberdiers as well. I do throw a lot of bottles at them from the Free Company. I thought about countercharging, but I just didn't want to give them a load of easy free kills because my halberdiers have got earthen ramparts on them, but obviously my Free Company don't. So I elect to just throw the bottles, hope that my halberdiers can tank the damage, and then I'll countercharge next turn. Now, the bottles manage to chip a wound off the Herald, which is nice. And then over on the left-hand side, the other Herald charges into my Spearman, and I'm able to do some Overwatch, stand and shoot with the other unit of Free Company, but I'm not able to do any damage over there, unfortunately. Just bottles just couldn't quite connect. We then have a charge from the Bloodletters into the unit of crossbows, but they don't quite make their charge, and so I do breathe a sigh of relief. I am able to get 1 more sort of round at shooting at them before they're going to crash into my crossbowmen on that left flank. The unit of Bloodletters over on the right flank aren't in charge range, so they just march really far forward, getting into my face. Of course, there's no magic or shooting with the Corn Demons, so we go straight into combat. Over on the right-hand side, the steam tank continues to grind out with the Bloodhounds, killing another 1 and injuring another between all the instability and everything. And then we have the big fight in the middle with the Herald, and my 5-up ward save is doing some good work for me here. I do lose quite a few of the halberdiers, but I don't lose the entire front rank, and I'm able to fight back, and I make way with my characters. I'm able to fight back against the Blood Crusher, and I do actually bring it down by a couple of wounds, so it's just got 1 wound left. I'm not even going after the Herald for now. Funny thing is that my characters didn't actually do a huge amount of damage. I missed all of my attacks with my general, and it was actually my captain that managed to sneak a wound through on the Blood Crusher, and then it was the remaining halberdiers I got to fight that also snuck another wound through on it. As for the Herald going into the Spearman, he actually whiffs a lot of his attacks, considering he's hitting very well and wounding very well. He does flub a lot of his attacks, and I am able to poke back with my spears, and even though I'm wounding on 6s, I do manage to get a couple of wounds through. And this is when I realized, like, these Khorne demons, like, they're you know, especially on these chariots, they're tough, like they're toughness 5, but they've only got like a 4-up save, I think, followed by like sort of a 5-up ward. So if you wound them, it's eminently possible to just get a couple of wounds through. So they're not as tough as I thought they were going to be, and that definitely plays into my plans for the next turn. Speaking of which, it is my turn. So the Khorne demons have crunched in. They've dealt a lot of damage to the halberdiers. They've dealt a bit of damage to my spearmen, but the line has held. You know what time it is, guys? It's time for a countercharge. So my free company units both go for their charges to support their regiment parent units, and they actually make both charges. One of the units of free company fails its impetuous check and just goes straight in, and the other unit actually passes its impetuous check, fails the charge, but thanks to Warband I get to re-roll the charge and I'm able to actually make it in there. So I've got a flank charge on both of the heralds on their blood thrones. I don't have any other movement with my army, so we go over to shooting. Now, the crossbowmen know that they're not going to be lasting much longer, so they just stay and just do one final volley, and they're able to kill a couple more of the bloodletters on the left flank, just whittling them down. I then move over to the other bloodletters. Now, this unit has got to go, because if I don't kill this unit of bloodletters, it's going to start getting into my handgunners, it's going to start getting into my artillery. So I fire a unit of handgunners on a hill, so I get to fire both ranks. I fire a cannon with grape shot, and I fire the Hellblaster volley gun. Now, the handgunners go first, and they're actually, thanks to being like toughness 4 straight up and big AP -1 straight up, they're just cutting through the demons quite effectively. They normally have like a 6-up save, now they just don't get a save. So they're able to pitch a couple of them down. The cannon fires its grape shot and is able to, it gets sort of like 6 hits, and again is able to sort of kill 2 or 3 more of them. And then the Hellblaster volley gun goes. Oh, I love this thing, man. I roll a 10, a 10, and an 8 on the artillery dice. I am in half range, sir. Needless to say, there was nothing left of those bloodletters. They got sent straight. There wasn't even enough to send back to Khorne's Skull Throne. They were not only banished, they were utterly destroyed, not to come back. That's how I like to think it. They just took a full Hellblaster volley gun to the face, and I think there was a herald in the unit as well. He fucking died as well. So the Hellblaster volley gun just blew him off the table and sent them back to the abyss from whence they came. As for combat, my steam tank was able to actually finish off the Khorne dogs. I rolled really well for my number of stomps. John didn't pass any of his invulnerable saves, and then he completely flubbed his leadership test. He rolled like a 5 and a 6, causing severe demonic instability and causing the unit to go poof. We then have the Blood Crusher, who, again, he gets to strike first. He kills a few halberdiers. But in return, I am actually able to kill that Blood Crusher. And so the only unit that is really left, the only units that are really left in the fight at this point are going to be the 2 heralds and the unit of bloodletters that are on the left-hand flank. Now, in terms of the 2 heralds, one of my free company units, the one on the left-hand flank, actually goes ham, gets loads of hits, gets a surprising number of wounds, and is actually able to bring that herald down by a couple of wounds, and the spearmen also chip a wound off it as well. So I think this herald at this point has actually taken like 4 wounds just from overwhelming numbers of like strength 3 attacks, because it's only got like a 4-up save. So if you can get the 6s, it often starts losing those wounds quite quickly. However, the herald on the right-hand flank really just isn't, he's not budging, and I think between the free company and the remaining halberdiers that sort of got to fight there, he might take a wound, he might not, but he's still pretty much rocking and cocking. Now, I'm not gonna lie, going into turn 3 for the Khorne, it's looking pretty dire. They've got a unit of bloodletters which are almost half whittled down by the crossbowmen. and they've got a Herald on 2 wounds, and they've got a Herald on like 5 or 6 wounds. It's not a lot. Over the course of the Khorne turn 3, they do charge into the crossbowmen, and the fights are ongoing with the Heralds. Now, the crossbowmen actually survive the charge from the Bloodletters because they're deployed in this sort of just 4 wide. It means that they only get like 5 attacks to the champion, and they just don't hit that well. So my crossbowmen end up prodding one of the Bloodletters in the face, and they lose like 2 or 3 guys back. They fail their leadership test, but they just fall back in good order, and the Khorne demons don't even roll high enough to re-engage. So I get to shoot them one more time, and then turn 4, the Bloodletters do pull the finger out and do wipe the crossbowmen out on that side, but that's really all that they do. And by the time they wipe the crossbowmen out, there's not many of them left, and I shoot them with one of my cannons with grape shot, and I end up wiping them out. So the Bloodletters essentially finally get the crossbowmen they've been going after by sort of the end of sort of turn 4, only to then get blood off the table by grape shot. With the Heralds, the one that's taken a whole bunch of wounds actually goes down this time between the Free Company. So what happens is the both of those units test to restrain because they won the combat, and they end up testing to restrain. And then when the Khorne charge in their turn 3, I throw a bunch of bottles from the Free Company on stand and shoot, and then the Spearmen actually finish the Herald off in Khorne turn 3. So by the end, so then there's just the one Herald left at the end of Khorne turn 3, which proceeds to get absolutely stomped. Where my steam tank, which is just in my turn finished off the Khorne Hounds, makes a long bomb charge into the side of the Herald and just flattens it because I get 7 impact hits. So end of turn 4 for the Empire. I know we've skipped ahead and we've merged those last few turns together, but really it was just bringing the Khorne units down. By the end of turn 4 for the Empire, all of the Khorne demons have been banished. They've been sent back to the warp, and it is a total victory. It's a crushing victory for the forces of man. Overall, I really enjoyed this game for a whole host of reasons. Firstly, it was great to see John and play against John again. Secondly, I'd not played against demons before, so it was a really good learning experience to sort of get a feel for how the army works. They've got some heavy hitters, but they are pretty fragile demons, even the Khorne ones. And another big thing that I think was on display here was the detachments actually felt like they worked, because I was facing a Khorne army that I was able to make come to me. And, well, they were obviously always going to come to me. I didn't even need to make them do it, but you get my point. And I was able to use stand and shoot effectively and then countercharge effectively as well. So this was the game where everything kind of felt like it worked the way it should have worked. And it kind of went to plan, which is... that never normally happens. But now let's go into our next game. And let's see what we're facing in round 2. So for my second battle, I got paired into James with his High Elves. Oh, High Elves have got a bit of a reputation, mostly a holdover from 8th edition fantasy when they were broken. Banner of the World, Dragon, anyone? But Warhammer the Old World is a little bit of a different story. They're definitely a strong faction, but we've not been hearing anywhere anything like the horror stories that we had in previous games of Warhammer Fantasy. Now, James was an amazing player, and actually someone that we've seen each other across the gaming hall at Just Play many times. He normally runs Eldar in 40k, and he's sort of the resident Eldar player at Just Play. And of course, being an Eldar player, when he comes over to Old World, what's he going to do? He's going to collect more pointy here. So he's gone from Space Elves to Fantasy Elves. Now, Jade's army list consisted of an Archmage who was level 4 on a Moon Dragon, which is only the toughness 5 one, with the Talisman of Protection, the Lore Familiar, the Seed of Rebirth, the Sword of Might, the Pure of Heart, and he was running High Magic. That is a 520 point character. The spicy meatball right there. He also had another Archmage, we're looking at double magey times here, who was also level 4 with the Ruby Ring of Ruin, a Silvery Wand, and Pure of Heart and High Magic. So all of the High Magic today. For his core, there was a unit of 17 Sea Guard who had the spears, warbows, light armor, and shields. They were also upgraded to be veteran, and they had a Seamaster, a standard bearer with the Razor Standard, and a musician. There were then 5 Illyrian Reavers with cavalry, spears, light armor, and short bows, and they had been upgraded to be scouts, and they had skirmishers, harbinger, and a musician. And then there was another unit of 5 Illyrian Reavers, and these guys had cavalry, spears, and hand weapons, and light armor and short bows, and they had skirmishers and harbinger and musician, but they did not have scouts, so that's where the difference between those two units is. For special, there's a big brick of 20 Phoenix Guard with ceremonial halberds, full plate armor. They were drilled, and I got to see what drill could do in this game, and Keeper of the Flame with the Lord Master's Cloak, and a standard bearer and musician. Finally, we had the rare units, which consisted of 2 Eagle Claw bolt throwers. I love bolt throwers, they're one of my favorite high elf units. And we had 2 Great Eagles and 5 Sisters of Avalon with the Bows of Avalon and light armor. Overall, a very elite army with a lot of punch behind it, but one that looked tiny in comparison to my hordes of state troops and free company. And one thing that James said straight off the bat, he said, I think I'm in trouble this game because I can kill 2 of your guys, every one of my guys that I lose, and yet I still get overwhelmed in this game. Definitely this was going to be an example of quantity versus quality. I have to admit, I was somewhat confident going into this game until I found out what the mission was going to be. We were doing flank attack. Now, flank attack is where you get a small deployment zone in the middle of your sort of side, and then you can't deploy on the left and you can't deploy on the right, not traditionally. You can allocate up to a third of your force to be in a flanking force, and you can choose whether they're going to be on the left or whether they're going to be on the right. So essentially it forces you to have a refused flank. The big issue with flanking force is that it does not take into account smaller board sizes. So the designers of the old world have said that they think the game should be played on a 6x4, and the minimum board size that you could really play it on is the 60x44, the 40k style board sizes. Now the problem with flanking force is you cannot deploy like 18, I think it's 18 inches in from the left, and you can't deploy 18 inches in from the right. So that leaves you with a tiny box of a deployment zone for 66% of your army. And when I looked around at this tournament, everywhere that I looked, people were struggling to take advantage of their deployments. They were struggling to actually deploy a lot of their stuff. In fact, one huge advantage that I would say James's army actually had in this game was how elite it was. He had no issue deploying in the center. No issue whatsoever, and he had plenty of room for his flanking force as well. But a lot of armies, and as you'll see in my deployment, were stacked up on top of each other and essentially had to go in waves rather than being able to fight as a cohesive force. In this mission, essentially my greatest advantage, my numbers, became my greatest disadvantage. So for my deployment, in my main force, I had my steam tank, which went over as far onto the right as it could, but obviously not on the right hand flank. And then I had my Hellblaster volley gun and my level 4 mage that was also towards the right hand side. And then bang in the center, I had my unit of halberdiers and my unit of handgunners. But I couldn't physically fit in my free company on the side of my halberdiers, so I ended up deploying them at the front essentially as a screen. And the idea was that the levies would go up front, and because levies don't cause panic, they're going to die, but at least they'll be able to absorb some Eagle Claw bolt throwers, they'll be able to absorb any sort of magic missiles that are coming out, and essentially the free company can just eat lead whilst the halberdiers can march up behind them. Or at least that was the plan anyway. My flanking force, I chose to go for a left flank, and I had my 2 cannons, I had my unit of spearmen, I had my crossbowmen, and I had my free company. And once again, my free company had to go in front of my spearmen because I could not deploy as wide as I wanted to. For the high elf deployment, they went for, from their perspective, a left flank as well. But from my perspective, of course, that is a right flank. Now, on their right flank, they put their Sea Guard, and they also put their Phoenix Guard as well. And then in the middle, they had their Dragon, they had their other Archmage, they had their Eagle Claw Bolt Throwers, and they had some Reavers, and they had the small unit of 5 bowmen, the Sisters of Avalon, whatever it is. And then for their Scouts, they took their unit of Illyrian Reavers, and put them on my refused right flank, essentially. So we had a bit of a swingaroo going on. They were going to come sweeping down the right flank. I was going to come up the left flank, and at some point we're going to have a big clash in the middle. With all the units down, it's time to roll for first turn, and I get first turn again. This +1 malarkey really coming in my favor. Now, I go for a somewhat aggressive attack because I've done flank attack before and I've been very passive and it's cost me the game. So I thought, you know what? Let's go balls to the wall. Upon sight of the enemy, I advance, sir. That's my style, sir. So my free company, my first platoon, my halberdiers, they basically march and do a bit of a turn as they're marching. Again, trying to use that building to anchor my left flank, trying to create a bit of a cauldron. But also, I know I need to get into those high elves as quickly as possible because the dragon is just going to fly around doing dragon things and being really annoying and being really difficult. So I need to get to grips with these elves because they're not that tough. My free company, as crazy as it sounds, my free company can genuinely beat elves in combat because I'm going to throw loads of bottles at them, which it wounds them on 4s. Now, I was wounding on 6s in the last game. The bottles were doing great work. So my bottle kids were going to do good work this game if I can start yeeting the bottles at the high elves, because they're only toughness 3. Remember, all the elf units toughness 3. That's the same toughness as me. Yeah, I've got 3 times as many bodies as they do. So I need to get up there quickly and start using my numbers as quickly as possible. So first platoon goes to that first regiment, first corps marches up and starts going towards the main bulk of the enemy. I use travel mystical pathways to teleport my Hellblaster volley gun over so it can see the Illyrian Reavers, and then I blow them all up because my Hellblaster volley gun decides to do a good job, and it gets a good number of shots, doesn't misfire, and sends the Illyrian Reavers back from whence they came. Now, it was my opponent who actually said I could do this. I was like, oh, does it not count as like moving? And he went, no, you can't move, and then you can't move before you use mystical pathways. You then use mystical pathways, and then it says you can't move anymore. But it doesn't say you have moved because you just sort of go plop from one side to the other. So I was going off what my opponent said was possible. He said that it had been done. It's the way they played it in the last game, so that's the way we played it in this game. But let me know what you think down in the comment section if you can use travel mystical pathways to get some cheeky teleporting Hellblaster volley guns around. Over on the left side, my spearmen and my free company have essentially formed a Napoleonic French column, and they just start marching forward. In front of them, there's an eagle, there's an eagle claw bolt thrower, and there's also a unit of the Illyrian Reavers, and there is the 5 Sisters of Avalon. And I'm like, you know what? I've got like 50 dudes here, 60 if you include the crossmen. I'm facing off against like 10 elves and a bird. If I can't overwhelm that, then why are we even here? So again, I'm like, let's just go forth and overwhelming numbers. Let's Imperial Guard this. Let's bring out the 40k vibes and send in wave after wave of men until the elves have all been overwhelmed. At least that's the plan anyway. Now, shooting isn't great because a lot of the elf units are hidden behind the hills on the left flank, and I've got 2 cannons versus an Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower. Good news, I do win that firefight turn 1 because it turns out Eagle Claws have only got 2 wounds, which is amazing because even if I roll a 1 on my damage because I'm a great cannon, I kill the Eagle Claw. And guess what? I rolled a 1 on my damage, the Eagle Claw died. But it's good. It's interesting how fragile those bolt throwers actually are. Most of the time, I thought every war machine had a minimum of 3 wounds, but apparently only has 2. So the Eagle Claw goes down to the first Great Cannon, and then I sort of realize I'm in a bit of a pickle here because I can't see anything else with my Great Cannons really, and I'm not going to be able to see much else the rest of the game. So my cannons have sort of killed their one thing, and then they're sort of going to start struggling for the rest of the game. But I've killed the Illyrian Reavers, I've killed the Eagle Claw. Nothing else of mine is really in range, so we hand over to the elves turn 1. One last thing before we hand over to the elves. My steam tank fired its cannon at the other Eagle Claw bolt thrower, and I rolled a misfire. So I did one wound to myself. But going over to the elves' turn 1, and they tentatively move forward on the right flank with the Sea Guard and with the Phoenix Guard, but they kind of realize that they don't want to be being too aggressive, because the quicker that they get into combat with me, the quicker I can bring my numbers to bear. They need to whittle me down before they go into combat with me, and this is where the mages come in. Now, high magic, it turns out, is really bullshit. It's really good. So the first thing is that the dragon mage makes himself makes the dragon ethereal. So I can't target it except with my own magic. And trying to get into a duel of fates with a high elf wizard seems like a losing recipe for my poor sorceress. So the dragon goes ethereal, which means I won't be able to target it, and then it starts moving quite aggressively towards me. It starts laying down these vortexes, it starts laying down these magical missiles, and my free company from First Corps start taking some pretty significant damage, and about half of the unit goes down between the various magic missiles and the Eagle Claw bolt thrower as well. Over on the left-hand flank, we have the Sisters of Avalon, and we also have the Illyrian Reavers, who start popping a few shots into my other free company unit, doing a couple of wounds here and there, but nothing too major. So end of High Elf turn 1, they're not actually coming at me very aggressively at all, apart from with their Ethereal Dragon, which they can be very aggressive with because it's not very easy for me to deal with. Coming over to Empire turn 2, and we've just got to press home. We've just got to keep pushing forward. We've got to try and close the distance as quickly as possible. Now, the first thing I do in Empire turn 2 is I keep pressing home the advantage. I've got to try and close the distance and bring my numbers to bear. On the left-hand flank, I march my free company forward and I march my spearmen forward, and my free company are actually able to shoot, and they get a really good number of shots off, and they get a wild number of hits, a wild number of wounds, and they're actually able to kill 4 out of the 5 Illyrian Reavers, and that last one actually breaks and flees, which is really good. So I've essentially dealt with or combat ineffective both units of fast cavalry, and that was with skirmish and everything. My bottle kids, they just went nuts. I think I fired one of the great cannons at it first and killed one because it's skirmish calculator 1, and then I used the bottle kids, the free company, to get the other 3, but they definitely went above and beyond. I was able to fire my crossbowmen, and I think I fired them into the Eagle. It was either into Eagle to the Sister of Avalon. I think with the Sister of Avalon, if I shoot at them, they can actually move away. So I don't think I shot at them, and I shot at the Eagle. I was able to do a couple of wounds to it. Over in the mid, and I continue to march forward with my remnants of my free company and my big brick of halberdiers, and I'm not really got any shooting over there because it's just my my handgunners, and they can't target the Ethereal Dragon, so they don't get to shoot anything. My steam tank fires, it moves forward and it gets a nice normal move, and then it fires the steam cannon again and it misfires again. There's another wound to itself. So that steam tank is definitely not having a good game this time. But it has to whiff at some point. It's been a very reliable unit up until this point, not just this tournament, but in general. Over on the right-hand side, I get greedy. I should have teleported my Hellblast volley gun away to safety, but instead, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go after the Great Eagle. I teleport it over, and I'm firing at long range. I get 1 misfire, and then I only get about 14 shots from the Hellblaster in general, and I'm only able to do a couple of wounds to the Eagle. This was it to the Sea Guard? I didn't even go after the Eagle, to the Sea Guard. This turned out to be 2 Billy Big Bollocks, as we'll see later on in the tournament. I should have played it safe with the Hellblast. I should have just put it on the hill, but I didn't. Okay, so High Elf turn 2 kicks off, and I have to admit, it is just a whirlwind of magical dominance. This is the first time when I've been like, okay, bringing 1 level 4 is interesting. Bringing 2 level 4s and they've got access to high magic. My God, sir. My God. Oh. So there's magical vortexes everywhere. There's tempests everywhere. There's buffs going off everywhere. I honestly couldn't keep track of it all, but the end result was, between like Ruby Ring of Ruin and other magical missiles and whatnot, my free company for first core completely wiped out, completely gone. Also, my free company for second core brought down to a handful. Maybe they're cut in half, maybe they're cut more than in half, but the free company take a blistering amount of damage this turn. That is most of what the High Elves do, but there are some movement shenanigans as well. Firstly, the Sea Guard and the Phoenix Guard start getting a little bit more ballsy. Now that they've chipped away the free company, they're like, okay, well, we now actually have got 1-to-1 essentially numbers with those halberdiers. Elves can definitely go 1-to-1 with men. The eagle also on the right-hand flank comes flying down and it starts threatening my Hellblaster. I'm going to have 1 turn to stop that thing, or it's going to get my Hellblaster. And it's eagles are literally designed that its favorite meal is war machines. Over on the left-hand side, the other eagle comes flying forward and gets close to my other unit of crossbowmen. But doesn't actually quite make it into them. It's sort of just flying forward. And that's the High Elf turn. A blistering amount of magic, flanking forces coming flying down, and the main blocks of infantry starting to threaten to get into the fight. The big thing is that the High Elf Dragon has a reserve move. I think it's one of the spells it can do, or it's one of its magical items. So after it's done all of its shooting, or its magical missiles, it gets to do like another move, and it goes from being in the middle of the board to sort of threatening the left-hand side. And I now see what's going to happen. It's an ethereal dragon, which can basically double move each turn, and it's going to hop over into my back line. That's High Elf turn 3. I'm going to have to deal with the dragon just rampaging around the back of my lines, because the Empire might be fighting a bit of a janky deployment, and we might be fighting elven shenanigans, but we have got steel, faith, and gunpowder on our side. Over on the left-hand side, my crossbowmen fire into the eagle, and they miss. That was very, very bad. Oh no, the eagles are like 1 wound. I'm like, come on guys, just kill it. And then I do get to charge my free company into the Sisters of Avalon, and I make the charge. My opponent decides to stand and shoot. It's a really long charge. I need the 6 to get it off, and I roll it the first time and I fail it, but I've got Warband, so I roll it again. Boom, baby! I get the big 6, and my free company go barreling into the Sisters of Avalon, and they beat the shit out of them. He beat the tar out of them. I don't quite get them in 1 round of combat. What ends up happening is I kill like a couple of them. Between their stand and shoot and their fight, they kill like a couple of me. It ends up balancing out and being a drawn combat, which is actually really good for me, because it means that the High Elves have to sort of just stick in there. And there's only like 2 of them left. And it's like 2 High Elves versus like 5 or 6 of my free company, and statistically I should be able to cut them down next turn. Skipping ahead a little bit, my free company do in fact drive them, men, drive them, and I do manage to cut down the elite Sisters of Avalon with free company militiaman. And that was one of my favorite moments of the entire game. They've been chucking balls at horses, throwing bits of cinder block. They've been jeering like, ah, and then these uncouth sellswords. It was like, come on lads, up and at 'em, and just sort of charge forward and just start beating them down. Chopping them up with like machetes and with rapiers and like pistols, like point blank. It was cool. It was a really cool moment, very cinematic moment, because they charged up the hill and they definitely caught the elves by surprise. And I can sort of imagine in my head, the elves are used to sort of quite ponderous formations from the Empire of Man and their big armor, their fighting in regiments. But these guys are a little bit more light, a bit more open order, and so they sort of were able to move a bit quicker than the elves were able to expect. And even the elven reflexes were no match for a Free Company unit failing their impetuous test and getting a 10-inch charge. Unfortunately, that kind of was the highlight of this turn, because my steam tank goes forward aggressively, gets a really good template with the steam gun. I'm thinking, look, I've only got a wound on 5. It's like the perfect chance for this thing to actually do something, and it kills like 1 Phoenix Guard. That every time I'm ballsy with the steam tank, every time I try and use that steam gun, it lets me down. It's a trap. If you listen to this now and you've got a steam tank, don't believe the steam gun. It will tell you that it can like melt things with like plate armor. It can't. It's just not got the strength to do it. And then my Hell Blaster goes into the Eagle. Now, bear in mind, the Eagle's got like 3 wounds. All I need to do is kill it. And if I can do that, I'm going to get that Eagle out of the way and I'll be able to just start piling Hell Blaster shots into the flank of these Lothern Sea Guard. I roll a misfire with the Hell Blaster, and then I proceed to roll like a 2 and a 4 for the number of shots. I managed to do a wound to the Eagle, but that's really bad because it's going to make its charge next turn because it's got fly 10. And so my turn 3, when we actually sort of step back and look at it, it was a bit of a damp squib. I had an awesome moment where the Free Company stormed the hill and beat the crap out of these 5 sisters. But my archers failed to kill a 1-wound Eagle, my Hell Blaster failed to kill an Eagle, and my steam tank killed 1 Phoenix Guard and exposed itself for that. It was not a good turn 3, to say the least. And unfortunately for Vossenberg's Vagabonds, the High Elves had a pretty good turn 3. Firstly, the Eagle on the right flank gets into my Hell Blaster volley gun and kills it. Secondly, the Eagle on the left flank gets into my archers, kills them, they fail their leadership test, and it runs them down because they run about 2 or 3 inches. It's an embarrassingly low flee roll. The Ethereal Dragon flies over the top and starts introducing itself to my cannons, which is not good at all. And my steam tank ends up getting charged by the Phoenix Guard. And it's now in a position where my halberdiers, they just can't join the fight. They're too wide, and because they don't have drilled, essentially I've got to spend a turn like trying to address my ranks. But even then, I'm not going to be able to address enough to actually get into the fight here. My own steam tank is actually blocking me up now. For shooting, the High Elves unleash every magical bit of chicanery that they have into my spearman block and basically delete it. I think I have about 5 left by the time I'm done, just between various tempests and magic missiles and other things that are flying around and ruby rings. It's not a good time to be a spearman in my army. And the Phoenix Guard are actually they get into the fight with the steam tank, and they don't do like a huge amount of damage to it. They do some though, because they've got like Fury of Cain up and all this kind of stuff, and the steam tank is able to get a reasonable number of stomps back. But overall, my steam tank unfortunately is forced to give ground because it's unbreakable, and this is where it ends up falling into that position where it starts blocking my own troops. As we go into the second half of the game, it's kind of obvious that the High Elves have got the advantage. It's become their game to lose. They have secured the flanks successfully, and they have the firepower advantage now to really just whittle me down. So we're going to sort of breeze through the last few turns and sort of explain what happens on each flank. Firstly, over on the left-hand side, my Free Company had finished off the Elven Archers in their turn 3, and then in their turn 4, they attempted a long charge onto the Bolt Thrower, but didn't quite manage it. In the Elf turn 4, those Free Company were shot down by the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, but my remaining Spearmen, and there weren't very many of them left, did actually make a successful charge against the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower with 3 survivors, who then proceeded to do no damage whatsoever, and the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower actually beat them in combat, which was pretty sad. That was pretty bad. Oh. The dragon essentially spends the next couple of turns picking up my 2 cannons, and then it comes around the flank and picks up my, between magic and shooting, picks up my level 4 wizard and also picks up my my handgunners as well. In fact, the only thing that really happens of note for the Empire is my halberdiers are essentially left pretty much untouched the whole game. My opponent very wisely goes, that's a unit he doesn't want to engage. That's a unit that's completely blocked at the moment. I do try a couple of times to travel mystical pathways them into a better position, but either I failed to get it off or my opponent easily dispels it. My mage definitely was outclassed in this game. And so the final sort of cool thing though that happened is the steam tank. Now, it had been charged by Phoenix Guard. Over the course of the Elf turn 4 and turn 5, they'd actually flank charged it with the Phoenix Guard and the Sea Guard as well. And it just wouldn't die. It would not die. And it ends up grinding through the Phoenix Guard. It ends up grinding through a lot of the Sea Guard. And by the time the dust has settled, the steam tank actually ends up running down the Lothern Sea Guard because it just wins a combat. There's this one round where it's the final round of the game, the final round of combat. The steam tank is on 1 wound, and it has to make 3 5-up armor saves from the Phoenix Guard. And I roll them one at a time, and I roll a 6, followed by a 6, followed by a 6. And I pass it. The steam tank is indomitable. Now, I need a name for that steam tank, man, because that is awesome. So if you've got any suggestions for the unkillable steam tank, get them down in the comment section. But because the elves didn't do any damage to me, I ended up rolling really high on my number of stomps, and I killed 4 Sea Guard, and then I was also able to kill 1 with my engineer, so I killed 5 Sea Guard. And because this combat had been going on since turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, there weren't any rank bonuses left, and I actually break the Sea Guard and I run them down and I catch them, which is amazing. So I actually do end up getting a fair amount of points from that. My steam tank, just to give you an idea of how much I love this unit and to give you an idea of how good this unit is, my steam tank basically survived. A little bit of luck on its side, went toe-to-toe with my opponent's best combat infantry unit and was flanked by a unit of another combat infantry and was able to actually grind it out. And if my halberdiers hadn't been in that giant block of 10 by 4 and had been in a smaller formation, and my halberdiers had got in there, I very well could have turned the tide of this game. But as it was, when the dust had settled, all I had left over was my steam tank and my halberdiers, and so I had managed to score about in fact, I can tell you the exact score. I got 674 victory points from this game, and the High Elves got 1,150 points. So it wasn't a complete smashing. I didn't get tabled in any way, shape, or form. My steam tank survived. My characters mostly survived, apart from my mage, and my halberdier survived. Essentially, the elves do what elves do. They saw the big brick units, and they tied them up, or they kited them, and they went around and killed everything round the flanks, which is what you're definitely meant to do if you've got the maneuverability advantage and you've got the firepower advantage. So very, very well played to James, and a very well-deserved win for him in that round 2. But with all of that said, let's get into Game 3 and the final battle of the tournament. And I was paired into Ed and his Tomb Kings. Now, I've only played Tomb Kings once before, but it was very much at a beginner tournament. This time, it was against a very experienced Tomb King player. Ed had a Tomb Prince with the Talisman of Protection, and he was leading a unit of Tomb Guard. He also had a Royal Herald in that unit as well. He had a High Priest who was level 4, who was just rocking around on foot in a unit of skirmishers, and he had the Ruby Ring of Ruin. And he had the Law Familiar as well. And then he had another level 4 wizard. You see this double level 4 thing cropping up a lot now. Magic is powerful if you lean into it. And he had another level 4 High Priest who had no upgrades but was just on elementalism. He had a Necrotech who had the whip and had light armor. For his core, he had a unit of 29 skeleton warriors, and then he had a unit of 28 Tomb Guard. Now, the skeleton warriors had light armor, shields, massive arms, standard bearer with the war banner, but no musician. And the Tomb Guard had light armor, shields, drilled, and they had the tomb captain, and they had the standard bearer, no musician again. There were 5 skeleton skirmishers with warbows, and that's where both priests were attached to that unit. And then he had 3 Necropolis Knights with the hand weapons, the light armor, and the shields, and the great weapon for the captain. He also had the standard bearer in there as well, and he had Banner of the Desert Winds. There was 2 Tomb Scorpions, one with ambushers. There was a Necrosphinx, a Screaming Skull Catapult, and the Casket of Souls. The mission for the final game was Mountain Pass, a mission which I've traditionally done very well on. And for deployment, on my left-hand side, I had First Corps with the handgunners on the extreme left, and then the halberdiers in the center, and then my free company in front of them. And then I had Second Corps over on the right-hand flank, with the spearmen with the free company on their left, and the archers on their right on the hill. I had all of my artillery pretty much on the hill as well, with my level 4 mage, and my steam tank was over on the extreme sort of left-hand flank. For the Tomb Kings, they had their units of infantry in the middle, with the skeletons looking like they were going to break left, and with the Tomb Guard looking like they were going to break right. We then had on the left-hand flank the big old Necrosphinx and the Snake Riders, and one of the Tomb Scorpions was rocking around there as well. In reserve, we had the other Tomb Scorpion, and sort of sneaking around at the back, we had the Casket of Souls and the Screaming Skull Catapult. We roll off for turn 1, and I get it again. I go first all 3 games. Huzzah! Skinwalker Mordian was doing some good work today. Now, in my first turn, I move aggressively forward with Second Corps on the right-hand side, and I'm a little bit more tentative with my move in the middle with First Corps. I'm trying to sort of anchor my Second Corps with that building in the middle, which I've done in a couple of games now, and it's worked out relatively okay in those games. For my shooting, I pick up the Screaming Skull Catapult straight away. And I also pick up the Tomb Scorpion, that's on the board straight away, with just one great cannon shot, next great cannon shot. And then I am able to fire my steam cannon, and that does hit one of the Necropolis Knights, but it passes its not sword save, its regen save. Tomb Kings turn 1 comes along, and my will be done and move forward pretty aggressively with the unit of Tomb Guard going towards my spearmen. They do the same thing with the skeletons going towards my halberdiers. And then they push forward with the Necropolis Knights as well. And then they go with the Necrosphinx. Now, something happens here which I had no idea Tomb Kings could do. And if I had known they could have done this, I would have completely changed my turn 1. But hey, this is it. Like, if you don't know your opponent's army, they're going to catch you out with these kind of things. The Necrosphinx moves forward, and I think it marches forward. It goes forward pretty aggressively. And then the Tomb Kings have this spell, which means that every unit that is in sort of range in this bubble can then do a reserve move. So all the Tomb King units suddenly surge forward again at the end of the shooting phase. And the Necrosphinx actually manages to get into the gap between where my First Corps is and my Second Corps. And that is horrendous. That is a game-winning move right there. Because now that Necrosphinx has got past my screening. It's not having to tar pit its way through infantry. And in fact, if I don't kill it in my turn 2... it's going to beeline straight towards all of my artillery and not only pick up a load of points, but get rid of the biggest advantage that I have in this game, which is my firepower. So it comes over to Empire turn 2. And I've got one job. Operation Kill the Necrosphinx. It's not a very fancy title, but it does what it says in the tin. I actually turn my free company around. Like literally, my free company are facing the wrong way. They just do a pivot on the spot, and so that means I've got 2 units of free company that can chuck bottles at the Necrosphinx. Yeah, they're going to need 6 to wound it, but I really need the thing to die. And then I get my free pivot with my war machines, and I've got my mage who can do Ruby Ring and can also do the Wind Blast. So I've got 2 great cannons, a Hell Blaster, 10 crossbowmen who can all shoot, 10 handgunners which can all shoot, and 20 free company to take 6 wounds off 1 Necrosphinx. I fire the first cannon, and it misfires. I fire the second cannon. I get the hit. I get the wound, and my opponent makes the 5-up regen. And that's pretty much it. Because nothing else. The other stuff I have in my army is there to like chip off the last wounds, and now it's being relied upon to do most of the damage. I fire the Hell Blaster, and I just don't get a very reasonable amount of shots, but the Hell Blaster is able to actually take off a couple of wounds, which is not too bad. I fire my handgunners, which don't do anything. I fire my crossbow guys, which are able to take a wound off it. I fire 2 units of free company, and I take another wound off. And by the time I'm done, this thing is on like it's on like 1 wound, 1 or 2 wounds left. But honestly, like Ed has been passing these 6-up regen saves, or these 5-up regen saves. Let us know tomorrow. Like I'm talking, he passes 1 from the cannonball. He passes 2 from like the volley gun. It's on one wound when I throw a unit of free company at it. I do 3 wounds to it. He fails 2 of his armor saves. He passes both of his regens. And then I fire my mage. And my mage does Wind Blast and is able to do like a couple of wounds for Wind Blast, which is good. But he passes like 1 of the armor saves, and he passes the regen again. I'm like, God damn it! Right, Ruby Ring of Ruin. I get a good number. I get the Ruby Ring off. I get a good number of hits, and I get like 2 wounds on this thing, and I'm like, yes, like brilliant, yes, 2 wounds. Okay, roll your saves. It's got like a 5-up save. He fails like one of the. I think he fails like one of the saves, or he fails both of the saves. And I'm like, boom, it's got to be dead, right? It's like this is a fire. I'm like, it's a fire attack. You're not gonna get like your regen save from like a fire attack, because I used to play a lot of fantasy back in the day, and the one thing that got past regen was flaming attacks. And he went, "Oh, that's not how it works in our world." And I went, "Don't do this to me, man. Not like this. Not like this." And he goes, "Firstly, the Necrosphinx is not actually flammable. There's very little which is flammable in the Tomb King army. It's basically the characters, and that's it." And he said, secondly, even if I was flammable, regen is not actually countered by flaming attacks anymore. It says, if you read the rule, often regen can't be taken if you've got like flaming attacks. But it doesn't say like specifically. You have to have the flammable like keyword as well as regen. And so he's got like 2 5-up regen saves to make. He rolls them, and he passes both of them. And like, no, I just want to say, I'm going to a tangent here. I friggin' hate regen, man. If you go back through these tournament after action reports, the number of times when I have just been screwed over by like a 5-up or 6-up regen is wild. Like, it happened against like the Beastman with the Gorgon, and it's happened in another game, and it's happened again with this Necrosphinx. And honestly, guys, I don't mean to like give too much away at the beginning of the final game, but that pretty much decided it. That was me not killing that Necrosphinx. It was now my opponent's game to lose. And it was really, really hard seeing him make all those 6-up regens. my kingdom for them to nerf regen, man. Oh. But there was some other stuff that was going on in the turn as well. My halberdiers and steam tank actually charged into the snake riders, and we were able to beat them in combat, but we didn't do a huge amount of damage to them. Again, the regens were flowing very hot on this side of the board as well. And I was able to kill one of them and damage another one. And that was my turn 2. Not great. I really feel like I should have swept the Necrosphinx and also the Snake Riders. But hey, sometimes the dice just don't go quite the way you want them to. Going into Tomb King turn 2. And they charge the Necrosphinx into one cannon. They kill it. They overrun to the next cannon. They charge the Tomb Guard into my Spearman. And I'm able to do a bit of Overwatch with the Crossbowman. But I can't Overwatch with, I say Overwatch, stand and shoot with the Crossbowman and kill 2 of them. But I can't stand and shoot with the Free Company because they're facing the wrong way now. The combat over there essentially is a drawn combat thanks to the extra combat res I get from the stand and shoot. I am able to finish off the Snake Riders in the Tomb King turn because I had followed up on them after they had given ground. But the big thing was that Necrosphinx surviving. I now have to kill that thing. It's on 1 wound, and I've lost like both of my cannons essentially. And it's in combat, so I can't shoot it again. So I have to now try and kill this thing in combat. And so going into turn 3 for the Empire, I have to charge it. And I have 2 Free Company units. And interestingly, both of them fail their impetuous checks. So both of them have to charge the So it was a pretty quick Tomb King turn 2, but they had definitely done some serious damage. And that Necrosphinx rampaging on my back lines is so difficult. It's not like in 40k where you can just shoot in a 360. When something gets behind your lines, it's very, very hard to deal with, as we saw with the Dragon in the last game. But going into Empire turn 3, I had to deal with it. Because it's in combat with my cannon now, so I can't shoot it. But if I can take that last wound off it, then that means I will be able to, if I can strike first, save my cannon, and then essentially trade a Necrosphinx for 1 cannon. That's not bad at all. So the first thing I do in my turn 3 is I charge both units of Free Company in. They both fail their impetuous checks, and a unit of Free Company managed to make it into the rear. One of the units of Free Company doesn't quite make it, and then I just charge unit of archers in. I charge the crossbowman in as well, because I'm thinking, look, I just need to do 1 wound to this thing. I need the Free Company between their sort of 10 or so attacks to do 1 wound. I need the archers between sort of their 5 or 10 attacks to do 1 wound. Someone somewhere just gets 1 wound in this thing and it dies, and I can save that cannon because I would have gone first. Elsewhere, my halberdiers start marching forward to take the fight to the enemy skeleton archers, and my steam tank starts going down that flank as well. I'm like, look, if I can't deal with the Necrosphinx there, I'm going to try and get these skeletons in front of me. There's some potential points to be earned there. Going over to my shooting, I actually do a load of damage with the Hellblaster volley gun, and also with steam tank and various other missile units into the skeleton warriors, but they do end up just erasing them all back. There was a chance they wouldn't quite get the rolls they needed, but they did manage to erase them back. So it comes to combat, and my Free Company go, and they manage to do 2 wounds to the Necrosphinx. It passes 1 armor save. It passes 1 regen save. I then do 5 attacks with my crossbowman. I'm able to do a wound. They fail the armor save. It passes the regen save. Oh. And the Necrosphinx kills my second cannon. And what's crazy is at the end of the battle, at the end of that fight, I had actually won the combat because the Necrosphinx, I'd done like 3 wounds, just managed to do like 3 wounds to the cannon. and I had done wounds, and the regen wounds counted towards combat res, and then I had a flank attack, and I had like a rear attack, and I had like a rank and all this kind of stuff. But the Necrosphinx is indomitable too. So even though it's lost combat, and it lost combat by 2, it didn't crumble to dust because of Indomitable. This thing will not die. And now not only have I lost my second cannon, but I've also had some of my other missile troops get tied up because they're stuck in combat with it. This Necrosphinx is single-handedly winning my opponent the game, and it's so cool, man. Like, my opponent's an absolute gen. He's like swapping out dice and everything. He's like, look, those are rolling a bit hot. I feel bad. I'm going to roll something else. And those other dice he's rolling are still rolling on as well. So it's just sometimes it's the way it goes. In the last couple of games, he said the Necrosphinx had been blown off the table turn 1 and never done anything. And this was the game when it was just bringing all of the luck, all the magic. And you know what? Sometimes it's cool when it happens. I can't really complain. My steam tank didn't die in the last game. It passed all of its saves and was doing a great job. So sometimes those big behemoths, they get to feel good. And one little side note, if you're a veteran of Warhammer Fantasy, it's nice that big monsters feel big because they used to feel very small. But going into Tomb King's turn 3, and they do essentially wrap up the game here. The Tomb Guard are between the last combat in my turn 3 and between the combat in their turn 3, essentially butcher down the majority of the remaining spearmen. They're sort of hanging on, sort of falling back bit by bit, but it's become clear that spearmen do not beat Tomb Guard, supported by like a Tomb Prince and some other characters as well. That is a fight where they're just going to eventually get cut down. And then over on the left-hand side, my opponent, between all of his magic and the Casket of Souls, kills my steam tank. Because there's like a special spell that they have, I think it's the Casket of Souls, where they have a spell which is like Unquiet Spirits, which lowers your leadership and does damage to you. And then the Casket of Souls has an ability which makes you essentially have to take a leadership test. And I fail it quite badly, and you just take a number of wounds, like the number that you fail it by, and my steam tank essentially just shits itself, and the crew just like get out and run away. That's how I see it. So my steam tank's gone down. My spearmen are in a fight that they're definitely going to lose, and my opponent takes a big, massive template, like a vortex, and just bangs it in front of his skeleton block. So I can't even get my halberdiers in there because it like slows my movement down. It's all going wrong for the Empire, unfortunately. But there is one very, very cool moment. There's one moment when I almost win the game. You see, despite the fact that the Necrosphinx just refuses to die, despite the fact that my steam tank has gone down, and despite the fact that my right flank is just crumbling, my opponent makes one mistake. He's played a perfect game up until this point, but he makes one error. He's got a 5-man unit of skirmishers, and he's got his 2 level 4 mages attached to this thing. And he's brought it around turn 4, turn 5. He gets those a bit too close to the front lines. And I'm able to, with the Necrosphinx goes down turn 4. It finally dies. And so my turn 5, my Hellblaster volley gun, a unit of Free Company, a unit of crossbowmen, and my level 4 mage all managed to get in range of this little 5-man squad. And I'm like, if I kill one of those mages at like 240 points, because the game is actually a bit of a knife edge at the moment, because the Necrosphinx is down, I've got a few of the bits in the bag, I've got like the Screaming Skull Catapult in the bag, a lot of stuff I've been losing is like 100 points here, 100 points there. If I can kill one of those mages, or if I wipe out that entire, that 7 models right there, if I do that, I will win the game. Because not only will I get enough points to swing it, but at the same time, his army is going to start crumbling. So I fire. I whittle down the 5-man squad first. And then I fire my Hellblaster volley gun. It goes in there. And because there's like 1 skeleton left after I'd done like a bunch of other shooting, it meant that I could fire the Hellblaster and target all of the characters. And the Hellblaster gets a good number of shots. It doesn't miss fire. It's just got long range. It's not even got long range. And I get a good number of hits. I get a good number of wounds. And my opponent, it has to roll them sort of one at a time at a skeleton. And the skeleton just dies. And so my opponent has 5 regen saves to make. And he has to, I think it was actually his Hierophant that was in this unit, and the other level 4 mage was just sort of near it, but not part of it. My opponent has 5 regen saves to make. On this cat, it's 5 up regen. It's only got 3 wounds. Statistically, this Hierophant should die, because he should get 2 out of the 5. And if it dies, the game gets completely swung and I win. My opponent picks up 5 dice. He rolls them and passes every single one. And my head just sinks into my hands. And I'm like, nah, bro, come on. You can't keep making all these regens. He can't keep getting away with this. But unfortunately, he did. And that was my last hurrah. It actually ended up being a really close game. Because I had killed like all the Tomb Scorpions. One of them had like popped out of ambush and I killed it with like magic. So I had killed the Tomb Scorpions. I had killed the Necrosphinx in the end. I did get a little 5-man unit of skirmishers. I did get the Screaming Skull Catapult and the Necrosphinx Riders, whatever they're called, the Necropolis Riders, the Snake Riders. So the end result is actually very close, and there's only about 200 points in it. And the final score was 749 points to the Empire and 955 points to the Tomb Kings. But I think the real winner here was regen. I think the real winner here was regen. If my opponent hadn't made those regen saves on the Necrosphinx, I think that the game would have been solidly in my favor. And if my opponent hadn't made all those regen saves on the Hierophant, all else being equal, I could have pulled that to a draw. But it probably wouldn't have been a draw, because like I said, his army would have started crumbling. His Casket of Souls would have started crumbling, because this happened on like turn 4, turn 5. So there would have been a couple of turns of crumble for him to endure. But it didn't happen. And so, well played to my opponent, well rolled to my opponent as well. I think we can all agree. And it was a decent Tomb King victory once all was said and done. And so, with the final game over, we come to the end of another tournament after action report. I had managed to get 1 victory under my belt against the Demons of Chaos. But after that, it had been a little bit downhill, and we had a loss versus the High Elves and a loss versus the Tomb Kings. 1 win, 2 losses. But I think respectable losses. I think in that second game, I hadn't played High Elves before, and I was a bit of a knowledge disadvantage. And also, I think that I was at a board disadvantage. I think if we'd been playing on a 6x4, I definitely wouldn't have felt so constrained. I would have been able to bring my numbers to bear. And I made a mistake with being so ballsy with the Steam Tank as well. I think if I changed that, I could have potentially changed the game. And being ballsy with the Hellblaster. On the third game, I hadn't played Tomb Kings before. I didn't realize about the reserve move spell. That really lost me the game more than anything else. Even if my opponent had made all those regens, as he had done, if he had just been like crashing into state troops, I could have been concentrating my firepower and picking up a lot of these other supporting units. So leaving, more than anything else, more than the saves, the leaving that gap is what lost me the game. And that was a mistake but it's also a very good learning experience as well. But before you go, there is one last really cool thing that happened at the event. When they were announcing, third and second and first place, by the way, I came 6 out of 10, which is not too bad, middle of the pack. They then announced best painting. And no word of a lie, I won Best Painted with my Empire Army, which just made the entire event, man. That was the best bit, because I put quite a lot of effort into painting the Empire and trying to make them really bright and popping, and not necessarily the best color scheme, but one that's really sort of eye-catching and really sort of bombastic. And it really sort of just felt right winning that Best Painted. It was really, really fun. I've never won Best Painted before. I don't consider myself much of a hobbyist, and so getting the Best Painted award put a big smile on my face, and I was absolutely chuffed with that. And on that note, we're going to bring the video to a close. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you leave lots and lots of comments down below. And let me know what you want to see in the next Tournament After Action report. I've got lots of Empire Cavalry that I've now finished 3D printing. So if you want to see some Empire Knights in the army, I can do that. And I've also got lots of Dwarves that are on my painting table as well. And I have a couple of new channel armies in the works. I have Beastmen, which are actually pretty much ready to go, and I've also got some orcs and goblins. So let me know what tickles your fancy, and if I can get an army together for it and start running it at some tournaments or some battle reports, then I will do so. If you did enjoy today's video, don't forget to smash the like button, and if you want to see more content like this, subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.